not a horse. Rose slipped and fell on the ice in the church parking lot as she was leaving the 8 a.m. Mass. She smacked her butt hard on the pavement and felt a pop in her right ankle. Her daughter, Laura, the closest to her, cried out, "Mom," and was by her mother's side. Laura was too small to help her mother up, but she offered a comforting hand on the shoulder. Rose sat up and reached for her ankle, but she wasn't flexible enough, so she lay back on her elbows. Rose's son, Matthew, remained oblivious, crouched nearby, examining cracks in the blacktop. Her husband, already at the car, turned and walked back to Rose. "What happened?" He waved Laura away and said, "Give your mother some room." Laura listened to her father. "My ankle," said Rose. "Help me up, please." Her husband stuck out a hand. "No, I need help." Her husband sighed, moved behind her, slipped his hands under her armpits, and yanked her up. "Careful, careful," said Rose. She felt her husband's weight pushing against her, so she freed herself, not wanting to fall again. But the moment she planted her right foot, the pain surged up from her ankle, through her calf and thigh, and she fell again anyway. Laura said, "Oh, Mom," and Rose's husband, "Honey, let me help you." "Gentle, please." He managed better the second time, got her arm around his shoulder, his arm around her waist, and they hobbled together toward the car. Rose felt Laura creeping behind them. She noticed people in the parking lot staring, but no one offered to help. Her husband's body pressed on her. She said, "Who's carrying who?" He grunted something. Rose didn't care. She surged forward from him. He said, "No, wait," but Rose slapped his arms away and limped to the car, ginger on the right foot. Her ankle burned. Laura whooped and yelled, "Go, Mom." Rose's husband went ahead and opened the passenger side door, then tried to help her, but Rose shook him off and used the car for support, gripping the roof as she lowered herself into the seat. Her husband had a hand on the door. "Wait, wait," said Rose, and motioned to her right foot, which still hung out of the car. She put her hands under her knee, lifted her leg, and pulled the door closed. Laura was already buckling herself in the back seat, and Rose heard her husband call to Matthew. She watched her son stand and run to the car. Her husband held the door open, said, "Get in," and slammed the door, almost smacking Matthew on the backside. Before they were out of the parking lot, Rose's husband said, "Matt, didn't you notice your mother fell?" "Yes." "Why didn't you help?" "You wanted my help." "You make me call you when we need to get to the emergency room? What were you doing?" "I came when you called." Rose said, don't talk back to your father," and to her husband, "It's okay. We'll get there when we get there." He drove like a crazy person anyway, and his red face and the bulging vein in his neck told Rose she'd hear about Matt's behavior later. And sure, she'd agree somewhat. The boy did live in his own world, but her husband would no doubt go on for hours, cast blame on her to the point where she'd feel guilty for slipping on the ice. In the car, Laura asked her mother several questions about the pain and swelling until her father said, "Enough." By the time they checked into the ER, Rose's ankle had turned purple and swollen to nature's greatest cankle. While they waited, Laura asked more questions, but when her father's glare became too much, she moved to strangers, sharing the story of her mother falling to a 14-year-old boy named Charlie who'd burned his hand trying to make eggs. Matthew sat next to his mother, but remained oblivious. Rose tried. She asked him, "What are you thinking about?" He mumbled something she couldn't quite understand. She asked, "Did you say fire and falling?" "Huh? No, never mind." Lack of point tenderness on Rose's ankle caused the doctor to guess she had a sprain, and x-rays ruled out a break. Rose also had some nasty bruises on her hip and butt, but nothing broken. The doctor put her ankle in a splint, told her she'd be on crutches for at least 2 weeks, gave her a prescription for Percocet and instructions for icing and elevation. On the way home, Rose's husband said, "Lucky you're not a horse, or else we'd have to shoot you." The next day, Father Costello showed up at the house to check on Rose. He told her that he had salted the parking lot and he promised to keep up with it in the future. Then he offered to pay Rose's hospital bills, but she told him they had insurance. Father Costello insisted on at least reimbursing any copays, but Rose assured him it wasn't necessary. After Father Costello left, Rose's husband said, "He was worried we're going to sue." "No, Father was being nice." Her husband chortled and said, "He was worried we're going to sue." While Rose healed, her husband offered to cook, but she didn't take him up on it. She knew it was an empty offer, and even those poor, starving UNICEF kids she saw on TV late at night wouldn't eat his cooking. Her husband offered to do the laundry, but she didn't take him up on it. She knew it was an empty offer, and he'd probably turn the whites pink anyhow. Her husband offered to clean, but she didn't take him up on it. She knew it was an empty offer, and if she was being totally honest, she was as much of a slob. Her husband didn't offer to help with the kids. He never offered to help with the kids. Laura picked up some of the slack. She always came through. Matthew remained oblivious, telling stories to his imaginary friends, inventing card games to play with them, watching days of TV, eyeballs inches from the screen. Rose worried someday her son might be living under a bridge. Rose did what she had to and got to getting better. Her faith and her prayers gave her strength. In 2 weeks, she was done with the crutches. She spent another 2 weeks in a walking boot, but in a month, she was on her own 2 feet again, and the ankle never gave her any problems, except on cold days. But even then, it was just a dull ache.
Bravo.